Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pariveshana Shotavasata Shri Srimati Bhagavad Srila Isi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Beauty Founder Acharya Jaguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gantra Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Jai Gaur Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 2, Chapter number 7, title Schedule Incarnations, text number 25. Vakshasthalasparsa drugna mahendravaha Vakshasthalasparsa drugna mahendravaha Danter vidambita kubjusa udhakasam Danter vidambita kubjusa udhakasam Sajo asubhi sahavines yatidarahatur Sajo subhi sahavines yatidarahatur Vispurjite dhanusa ucharato adhisainye Vispurjite dhanusa ucharato adhisainye Vakshasthalasparsa rugna mahendravaha Danter vidambita kakubjusa udahasam Sajo subhi sahavines yatidarahartur Vispurjite dhanusa ucharato adhisainye Vakshasthalasparsa rugna mahendravaha Danter vidambita kakubjusa udahasam Sajo subhi sahavines yatidarahartur Vispurjite dhanusa ucharato adhisainye Vakshasthalasparsa word for word translation. Vakshastala, chest. Sparsa, touched by. Rugna, broken. Maha Indra, the king of heaven. Vaha, the conveyor. Dante, by the trunk. Vidambita, illuminated. Kakub Jusa, all directions, thus being served. Udahasam, overtaken by laughter. Sajya, within no time. Asubhi, by the life. Saha, along with. Vinesyati, was killed. Dara Hartu, of the one who kidnapped the wife. Vispurjite, by the tingling of the bow. Dhanusha, bow. Ucharataha, strolling fast. Adisainya, in the midst of the fighting, soldiers of both sides. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. When Ravana was engaged in the battle, the trunk of the elephant, which carried the king of heaven, Indra, broke in pieces, having collided with the chest of Ravana, and the scattered broken parts illuminated all directions. Ravana therefore felt proud of his prowess and began to loiter in the midst of the fighting soldiers, thinking himself the conqueror of all directions. But his laughter, overtaken by joy, along with his very air of life, suddenly ceased with the tingling sound of the bow of Ramachandra, the personality of Godhead. Purport. However powerful a living being may be, when he is condemned by God, no one can save him. And similarly, however weak one may be, if he is protected by the Lord, no one can annihilate him. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnanan Jana Salakaya Chaksurulmanitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna everyone, thank you for coming to Srimad Bhagavatam class today. So we're continuing our discussion from the 7th chapter of the 2nd canto, which is giving a nice summary of all the different incarnations of the Lord. And currently we're hearing about the incarnation of Lord Ramachandra. So today's verse, text number 25, is the last verse given about the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra. And in today's verse, it's been highlighted about how powerful Ravana was. Ravana was so powerful, he was able to defeat all the demigods, including Indra, which we're hearing of today. And being so much intoxicated by his power, he was very much overtaken by pride. And Ravana thought himself to be invincible, that no one could defeat him. But he didn't understand that actually all of his power that he had was all coming from Krishna himself. Krishna is the source of all power. And that's the main point that Prabhupada is mentioning in today's purport. It's a short purport, it's just one sentence, but a very important point Prabhupada mentions. I'll read out the purport again. However powerful a living being may be, when he is condemned by God, no one can save him. And that's what we're reading today in today's verse, today's sloka. That Ravana, he was so powerful that he could defeat all the demigods. But even though Ravana was so powerful, because he was condemned by the Supreme Lord, no one could save him. He was finished. And the second point Prabhupada mentions, similarly, however weak one may be, if he is protected by the Lord, no one can annihilate him. And the second point also we see it in the Ramayana. Later on in the 9th canto, we'll get a bit more detailed description of the Ramayana. Sukadeva Goswami will give a nice summary of the whole Ramayana. And in the purports in that section, Prabhupada, he further elaborates on this point that he's making in today's purport. Prabhupada explains that in the battle in Lanka, on one side you had Lord Ramachandra, and Lord Ramachandra's army was just made up of all monkeys. That's it. So on one side you have Lord Ramachandra with an army full of monkeys, and on the other side, who do you have? You have 10-headed Ravana with all sorts of mystic power, mystic siddhis, with all sorts of different boons and benedictions from different demigods like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. And who does Ravana have in his army? He has so many big, powerful Rakshasas, demons with all sorts of divine power which they've accumulated through the mystic power. They all have different siddhis. They have different weapons, deadly weapons. And Ravana also has, as we're hearing from Mataji this Monday, Ravana's first son was named Indrajit, and he got the name by defeating Indra. So even his son was so powerful, he could defeat Indra. And all of these different Rakshasa soldiers of Ravana, they had all sorts of divine weapons, Brahmastras and other deadly nuclear weapons. So on one side, materially looking, seeing things from a material perspective, Prabhupada explains, it seems that Lord Ramachandra, he had no chance. It seemed like on one side, what you just have a bunch of monkeys. That's it. And Prabhupada explains on the other side, you have all these big, powerful demons, demoniac soldiers with all sorts of deadly, advanced material weapons. So what's the match? Naturally, looking at this from a material perspective, one will think, okay, the monkey soldiers, they're just going to get smashed. Prabhupada explains the only weapons the monkey soldiers had was they just had stones and big boulders and tree trunks. That's all they were using as weapons. So on one side you have a bunch of monkeys just throwing big stones and trees. On the other side you have Ravana with all of his demoniac soldiers who have accumulated so many different big powerful nuclear weapons. So materially speaking, there's no match. But Prabhupada explains in the second half of this purport, in 9th canto, but Ravana, or materialistic people, they don't understand that there's a higher power. So in terms of material power, obviously Ravana was a lot more superior. There was no match between Ravana's army and the army of the monkeys. But higher than material power is Deva, or transcendental power, which comes from the Supreme Lord. And Deva always overcomes material power. In this way, Prabhupada very nicely, he further explains this point that is mentioned in today's purport later on in the 9th canto Srimad Bhagavatam. That although externally speaking, Lord Ramachandra's army, the monkey soldiers, didn't stand a chance against the army of Lord Ravana. But because they were empowered by Deva Shakti, because they were empowered by the Supreme Lord himself, they were victorious in the battle. And the same thing that's being discussed here in this verse, which is describing a bit of the scene of the Ramayana, the same thing we see in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where on one side you have the 5 Pandavas, and on the other side you have the Kauravas. Materially speaking, again, there's no match. In the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Maharaj Parikshit, he gives a nice metaphor to explain what the situation is. Maharaj Parikshit explains that this battlefield of Kurukshetra was just like a big ocean, a vast ocean. And on the other side, on the Kauravas, there were big Timingala fish. And Timingala fish, they are certain sea creatures which are so big and so ferocious that they eat whales as their food. So we've all studied how big whales are during our school days. We understand how big they are, how huge. But these Timingala fish are so big and so ferocious, they eat whales as their food. So you can imagine how big this Timingala fish would be. So Maharaj Parikshit explains, he gives this metaphor that this battlefield of Kurukshetra was just like a big, vast ocean with hundreds and thousands of soldiers on both sides. And on the Kaurava sides, there was these big Timingala fish, such as Bhishma, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, Karna, and so many other great warriors who were all invincible, who no one could ever defeat. These are no ordinary personalities. Bhishma Dev, he was like the great-grandfather of the Kuru dynasty. And he was so powerful that once he even fought with Lord Parshuram. we were hearing on Sunday, the verse came about Parshuram, and we were hearing how Parshuram, he is the Shakta Vaishya avatar of the Lord, empowered with Dusta Damana Shakti, empowered with the Shakti to annihilate all sorts of miscreants. And he was so powerful that not just one time did he wipe out all the Kshatriyas, all the demoniac Kshatriyas on planet Earth, but 21 times he wiped up the whole Kshatriyas clan on planet Earth, generation after generation. And with the blood accumulated from all these Kshatriyas, he filled it up in some ponds, and now that's a holy place of pilgrimage in India. So Parshuram, we heard about how powerful he was, so powerful that 21 times over he wiped out all the Kshatriyas on planet Earth. But one time, Bhishma Dev, Parshuram was actually the spiritual master of Bhishma Dev. So he personally learned the art of archery from Parshuram, a Sakta Vaishya incarnation Lord. And one time, they even had a battle together, Parshuram and Bhishma Dev. And it was such a fierce battle. In the end, Parshuram, being so pleased with Bhishma Dev, he stopped fighting. Bhishma Dev was able to defeat even Lord Parshuram in battle. So he was so powerful, Bhishma Dev. On the other side, you also have Dronacharya. Dronacharya is the person who taught Arjuna how to fight. Arjuna was Dronacharya's student. So all those different weapons that Arjuna studied and learned how to use, it was all by the grace of Dronacharya. In this way, Parikshit Maharaj explains, on the Kaurava side, there were these big Timingla fish, which no one could defeat. The Timingla fish, they're like the kings of the ocean. No one can overcome them. They're the biggest, largest, and most ferocious fish. And then Maharaj Parikshit explains that on our side, the Pandava side, we just didn't stand a chance. We were just like little fish in comparison to these big Timingla fish. So again, materially speaking, just like in the Ramayana, we see, on one side you just have a bunch of monkeys with the only weapon, stones and big boulders and tree trunks. On the other side you have Ravana with all of his demonic soldiers, with all sorts of mystic power, mystic siddhis, with all sorts of divine heavenly weapons which they've all accumulated. So again, the same thing we see in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, that the Pandavas, they didn't stand a chance, materially speaking. The Kauravas, they had, in terms of quantity, they had a lot more soldiers, and even qualitatively, the soldiers on the Kaurava side, they were a lot more powerful, a lot more experienced warriors. But, Parikshit Maharaj explains, because Krishna was on the side of my great grandparents, or the Pandavas, we were victorious. So this point is what Prabhupada is highlighting here today, that no matter how weak one may be, if he is protected by the Lord, no one can annihilate him. On the other hand, even though one, doesn't matter how powerful one is, if he is condemned by God, no one can save him. Another point Prabhupada explains in the first canto of Bhagavatam, if we remember the section where Bhishma Dev is passing away, one point comes up that we understand Bhishma Dev to be one of the Mahajans, one of the 12 Mahajans. Then naturally a question arises, if Bhishma Dev is such a great exalted devotee that he is dubbed by the Bhagavatam as one of the 12 Mahajans. And a Mahajan is no ordinary person. In the list of the Mahajans, there's personalities like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, Yamaraj himself, 4 Kumaras, Kapila Dev. So Bhishma Dev's name is put in the same list of other great exalted devotees like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. So Bhishma Dev is no ordinary personality. He is a great Mahabhagavat. But then naturally the question arises, if Bhishma Dev is such a great exalted devotee that he is considered as a Mahajan, why did he fight on the side of the Kauravas? Why did he fight on the irreligious side against the Pandavas and Krishna himself? His worshipful deity is Krishna himself. He is a devotee of Krishna. And a devotee Krishna naturally makes friendship with other devotees. So why is he going against the Pandavas? Why is he on the Kaurava side, fighting against Krishna and fighting against Krishna's pure devotees like the Pandavas? So it seems a certain contradiction or question comes up in our mind, a doubt about Bhishma Dev's character. If he is a Mahabhagavat, if he is a pure devotee of the Lord, whom everyone's supposed to follow, why is he siding with Duryodhana? Such a sinful, demoniac person like Duryodhana, along with his demoniac brothers. And why is he fighting against Krishna and the Pandavas? And Prabhupada, he very nicely explains this in one purport in the first canto. Prabhupada explains that Bhishma Dev fought on the other side, the opposing side, due to the will of the Lord. And what was the will of the Lord? Prabhupada explains that Krishna, through this whole battle of Kurukshetra, he wanted to show the world that no matter how powerful of a warrior you are, no matter how great, exalted, and how powerful you are, if you're on the wrong side, if you're on the side of irreligion, you will be defeated. Doesn't matter how powerful you are. And Krishna, he taught this through Bhishma Dev. And Bhishma Dev, he knew this. He understood the heart of the Lord, that Krishna, he wants me to fight on the opposing side, to teach the world, not just now, but to teach the world for the future generations. That even though one might be so powerful, so exalted, so invincible as Bhishma Dev, if you're situated on the wrong side, if you're situated on the side of irreligion or dharma, still you'll be vanquished. So this lesson Krishna wanted to teach, and Bhishma Dev, he understood this, Prabhupada explains. That's why Bhishma Dev, as service to the Supreme Lord, he fought on the side of religion, just so Krishna could teach the world. Now, it doesn't matter how powerful you are, strong, materially speaking, if you're on the wrong side, you'll be finished. So that's another example that we can take from the Bhagavatam about this point, that no matter how powerful a living being may be, when he is condemned by God, no one can save him. And the second point Prabhupada is mentioning, similarly, however weak one may be, if he is protected by the Lord, no one can annihilate him. This second point, again, we can see from the first canto of Bhagavatam, that we can see this through Maharaj Parikshit. So the second point Prabhupada is mentioning is, doesn't matter how weak you are, if you are protected by the Lord, no one can kill you. No one can cause any harm to you. So this, again, we see in the first canto with Maharaj Parikshit. Maharaj Parikshit, he wasn't even born. He was still in the womb of his mother. And Aswatthama, we heard in the first canto of Bhagavatam, he released no ordinary weapon, the most powerful weapon of all weapons, the Brahmastra. And Brahmastras are compared, Prabhupada compares to modern day nuclear weapons. In fact, Brahmastras are so powerful that the heat or the radiation of Brahmastra is even felt by residents of other planetary systems. Before Aswatthama, he releases the Brahmastra towards Maharaj Parikshit. In the previous chapter, we hear in the Bhagavatam how first he releases the Brahmastra at Arjuna. And Arjuna is bewildered, he doesn't know what to do. And he takes shelter of Krishna. Krishna, I see this, some deadly thing coming towards me, what should I do? And Krishna tells Arjuna, okay, this is a Brahmastra released by Aswatthama. You release your Brahmastra and counteract this Brahmastra. So Arjuna releases his Brahmastra, and Aswatthama's Brahmastra is also coming. And when these two Brahmastras, they collide, Bhagavatam explains that the heat and the radiation generated by the collision of the two Brahmastras was so powerful, was so intense, that this heat and radiation was felt by all the residents of all the planetary systems. So not only was the heat felt by all the residents of planet Earth, but that heat went all the way up to all the heavenly planets, all the way to Brahmaloka, and it went all the way to the lower planets. All the residents of all the different planetary systems in the universe, they could feel the heat of that radiation. So that's how powerful a Brahmastra is. It's so powerful that its heat or radiation can be felt in other planetary systems beyond the Earth. So such a powerful, deadly weapon, Aswatthama has released onto a baby, onto Maharaj Parikshit. So again, materially speaking, what chance does Maharaj Parikshit stand? He's just a baby in the womb of his mother, and on the other side, this big deadly weapon, a Brahmastra, is coming. A weapon so powerful that its heat can be felt by other planetary systems. So again, materially speaking, there's no chance. Maharaj Parikshit doesn't stand a chance. You would think, okay, just in a second, he'll just be finished, that's it. But again, as Prabhupada explains, doesn't matter how weak one may be. You can be not even born, you can be a little baby just in the womb of your mother, but if you have Krishna's protection, then even a great Brahmastra cannot cause a single harm to you. And that's the point we see again in the first canto of Bhagavatam. No matter how weak one may be, if he is protected by the Lord, no one can annihilate him. So because Maharaj Parikshit had the protection of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Aswatthama's Brahmastra could have no effect. No, not a single scratch came upon Maharaj Parikshit, and he was safe. And the same point, again, we see in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam with Prahlad Maharaj. On one side, Prahlad Maharaj, he's just a 5-year-old boy. And what mystic powers, what siddhis, what deadly weapons would a 5-year-old boy have? Nothing. He just has himself. He's just an innocent 5-year-old boy. And on the other side, you have this big ferocious demon, Hiranyakashipu. Prabhupada explains that Hiranyakashipu, out of all the demons of all time in the history of the universe, Hiranyakashipu is the greatest of all demons. No one was ever as powerful as Hiranyakashipu. He was so powerful, he just completely took over the whole universe. Every single person in the universe was under his control. All the demigods were under his control. The sun planet, the moon planet, the wind god, water god, everyone. The whole universe was under his control. One place Prabhupada explains, or Bhagavatam explains, that Hiranyakashipu was so powerful, if he would just move his eyebrows, then the demigods would, being afraid, fearing their life, they would go run away and hide themselves. So he had every single person in the universe under his control, except for obviously Lord Shiva, Brahma, and Vishnu. Everyone else was under his control. And everyone was so much afraid of him. And Hiranyakashipu was so powerful that he stopped all the Vedic sacrifices to Vishnu and the demigods. And instead he forced all the residents of all the different planetary systems to worship himself. And even great devotees like Narad Muni, Prabhupada explains, they went along with the Leela and they also went under the submission of Hiranyakashipu. So on one side you have such a great demon like Hiranyakashipu, who Prabhupada explains was the greatest demon of all time. And he had all mystic powers, all mystic siddhis, all the demigods were under him. And on the other side you have Prahlad Maharaj, just the innocent 5-year-old boy. He doesn't have any brahmastras, he hasn't accumulated boons from different demigods, he doesn't have 8 mystic siddhis, nothing. So again, materially speaking, what chance does Prahlad Maharaj stand against a big demon like Hiranyakashipu? But again, as Prabhupada explains, no matter how weak one may be, if he is protected by the Lord, no one can annihilate him. Hiranyakashipu tried so many different ways to torture Prahlad Maharaj, to assassinate Prahlad Maharaj. Nothing worked. Why? Because Krishna was protecting him. He ordered his demoniac soldiers to attack Prahlad Maharaj with deadly weapons, to chop him off, to cut him in pieces. It didn't work. He tried throwing Prahlad Maharaj off the cliff into the ocean. It didn't work. He tried poisoning Prahlad Maharaj. It didn't work. In this way, Bhagavatam explains, not just 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, or 5 times did Hiranyakashipu try to kill and assassinate Prahlad Maharaj, but Bhagavatam explains, Hiranyakashipu tried thousands of different ways to kill Prahlad Maharaj. Thousands of different ways. But nothing worked. Why? Because Prahlad Maharaj was protected by the Lord. This is the special benediction of the Supreme Lord. And this point we see again and again through the Bhagavatam, about the power of the protection of the Lord. By the protection of the Lord, even a very weak, insignificant creature, such as a 5-year-old boy, can defeat a great big demon such as Hiranyakashipu, who had the whole universe under his control. By the power and the protection of the Lord, even such a tiny, feeble devotee of the Lord, who's just in the womb of the mother, in the womb of his mother, even he can be so powerful that he can counteract the Brahmastra, which we see with Maharaj Parikshit. He was just a small baby in the womb of his mother. But because he was empowered by Krishna, because he had the protection of Krishna, he was able to counteract the Brahmastra released by Asvatthama. So in this theme we'll see again and again through the Bhagavatam, about how the devotees of the Lord, although externally or materially speaking, although it might seem that they're weak or they don't stand a chance against the demons or the other side, still because Krishna is on their side, still because Krishna is empowering them, Krishna is protecting them, the devotees are always victorious. And as we were discussing, we see this with the Ramayana, how the monkey soldiers were able to defeat all those big demons like Ravana and his soldiers. We see this in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where Arjuna and the Pandavas were just like little fish in comparison to the big Timingala fish on the other side. But Arjuna and the Pandavas, they were able to be victorious. And we see this with Maharaj Parikshit, how he was able to counteract the Brahmastra of Asvatthama, even though he was just a baby in the womb. We see this with Prahlad Maharaj, how he was able to survive all the different plans by his father to assassinate him. And another example that comes to mind is that in 8th canto, we see of with Bali Maharaj. So initially between the fight between the demons and the demigods, after I think this pastime also we covered recently, I think it was on Saturday, we were talking about the churning of the milk ocean, about Dhanvantri. I think it was Shivnanj Prabhu. He was talking about Dhanvantri, I think that was the text. So after the whole pastime of the nectar, there's a big fight between the demons and the demigods. And the demigods are able to defeat the demons. And even Bali Maharaj, he also falls unconscious in battle, and he also gets defeated in the battle. But Bali Maharaj's spiritual master, Sukracharya, he has this very special mantra. It's called the Sanjeevani mantra. And just by chanting this mantra, someone who's died on the battlefield, he can be revived back. But it's mentioned, and Sukracharya, he uses the mantra to revive back Bali Maharaj back from death. And he uses this mantra to revive back other soldiers on the battlefield. Prabhupada explains that only those soldiers whose limbs were intact, he could revive back. If certain soldiers, their heads and limbs were all chopped off and their body was all over the place, then he couldn't revive them back. But those dead soldiers on the battlefield, whose body was still intact, using this Sanjeevani mantra, Sukracharya was able to revive back. So after Bali Maharaj is revived back, naturally he's feeling so much gratitude toward his spiritual master, Sukracharya. He starts worshipping his spiritual master. He starts serving him very sincerely, because by his grace only he's been revived back and given a second chance. And by serving his spiritual master so sincerely, Bali Maharaj, Bhagavatam explains, he is able to acquire all the blessings of a great Brahmana like Sukracharya. And it's also mentioned that Bali Maharaj was also able to accumulate the blessings of other great Brahmanas coming in the dynasty of Brigamuni. In this way, Bhagavatam explains that Bali Maharaj, he became so powerful just by acquiring the blessings of his spiritual master, by acquiring the blessings of the Brahmanas, that when he went to attack Indra for a second time, this time when Bali Maharaj was coming with his army, he looked so powerful, just by looking at him, Indra just fled in fear. Indra didn't even attempt to fight Bali Maharaj. He just went running towards his spiritual master Brihaspati. And he went to Brihaspati and said, Bali Maharaj again is coming. And unlike last time, something is different about him. This time he just looks completely invincible. He's doing something different, something else. He's empowered by some divine power. I don't know what it is, but this time he just looks undefeatable. There's something different about him. And Brihaspati, he tells Indra that yes, what you're saying is right. At this moment, at this point in time, Bali Maharaj, he's been empowered by the blessings of the Brahmanas. He's been empowered by the devotees of the Lord. And so there you don't stand a chance. Being empowered by the blessings of the Brahmanas, he is at this point in time, he's invincible. So the best thing for you is to just go in hiding. There's no point even attempting to fight Bali Maharaj, you'll be smashed. So just go in hiding. Later on, when the time is right, you can fight with him. And again, in his purports to this section of the 8th canto, Prabhupada again, he emphasizes on the same thing. That before Indra was able to defeat Bali Maharaj, because Indra had the blessings of his spiritual master and had the blessings of the Supreme Lord. But now, at this point in time, Bali Maharaj, he was the one who had acquired all the blessings of the Brahmanas. And by acquiring the blessing of the Brahmanas, one naturally acquires the blessings of the Lord. Because Krishna, to please Krishna, one has to go through his devotees. If one pleases the devotees of Krishna, one naturally will get all the benedictions of the Lord. So again, Prabhupada highlights the same thing. That if one wants to become powerful, then one just has to invoke Krishna's blessings. One just has to invoke the blessings of the devotees of the Lord. And that's why we see again in the 8th canto of Bhagavatam, how Bali Maharaj, he became so powerful and so invincible because he was able to acquire the blessings of the Brahmanas and in that way gather the blessings of the Lord himself. So this point again and again we see throughout the Bhagavatam. And another example that comes to mind is again from the 1st canto of Arjuna. So the first point Prabhupada's mentioned purport today is however powerful a living being may be, when he is condemned by God, no one can save him. So the main thing that's been emphasized here is how actually one becomes powerful not by one's own ability. The power or whatever ability we have is all coming from Krishna himself. And this point we see very nicely displayed in the 1st canto with Arjuna. So again in the 1st canto, after Krishna, he leaves Hastinapur and goes back to Dwarka. Then there's another chapter explaining how Krishna is received by the residents of Dwarka. And then in the next chapter, it's given that Maharaj Yudhishthira, he starts seeing different bad omens in his kingdom, and he starts getting worried. And at this point in time, Arjuna, he has left Hastinapur and he's gone to Dwarka to catch up with Krishna, to see how Krishna is doing, to see how the Yadus and his family men are doing back in Dwarka. And for many months, Arjuna has gone, and Arjuna hasn't returned to Hastinapur. So Maharaj Yudhishthira is a bit worried, and Maharaj Yudhishthira is talking to his younger brother Bhima, and saying, our younger brother Arjuna, for so many months he's been gone to Dwarka, he hasn't come back, there's no news from him. What's happening? And at the same time, Maharaj Yudhishthira is seeing so many omens, bad omens in his kingdom. Then later on, Arjuna, he comes back, and Maharaj Yudhishthira inquires from Arjuna, different things that, you look very morose and depressed. What is the reason for this condition? And he puts forward different questions, inquiring from Arjuna. Is it because of this you're upset? Is it because of that you're upset? Then finally he concludes, or is it because Krishna, our dearmost friend, the Supreme Lord, has left this planet? And then finally in the next chapter, Arjuna admits that yes, our Supreme Lord Krishna has left this planet. And then that whole chapter is so beautiful. In that whole chapter, there's a whole series of verses where Arjuna is pouring his heart out, where Arjuna is sharing his realizations to his brother Yudhishthira. And in this series of verses, Arjuna, he recollects back of how through so many times in his life, how Krishna came to his rescue to help him. Arjuna remembers that, during the marriage ceremony of Draupadi, it is only by Krishna's grace was I able to win her hand. In that marriage assembly, Arjuna explains, there were such great warriors like Karna and other great warriors from all around the planet Earth. But none of them could achieve could fulfill the challenge except for me. And the only reason I could win Draupadi's hand was by Krishna's grace. So the challenge was that there was a fish attached to the ceiling, and without looking at the target, one has to look at the reflection on some water. And just by looking down, one has to point the bow up and shoot the eye of that fish. Not only that, there was some obstacle which was momentarily coming across the vision of the fish. So it was like an impossible task which no one could do except for Krishna and Balaram. But Arjuna explains, because Krishna empowered me, I was able to fulfill this challenge and win over Draupadi's hand. In another verse, Arjuna remembers that once I even fought with Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva came in disguise and he fought with me. And I was able to defeat even Mahadev, Lord Shiva, in battle. How is this possible? It is only because Krishna empowered me, I was able to defeat Lord Shiva in battle. Another example Arjuna remembers is that, in the heavenly kingdom, I was able to defeat even Indra. And I was able to get such great divine weapons, such as Brahmastras and other heavenly weapons from the heavenly planets. And all this was again possible only by the mercy and the grace of my Lord, Krishna himself. And then Arjuna again, he remembers the battlefield of Kurukshetra. That in this battlefield of Kurukshetra, I didn't stand a chance. I didn't stand a chance against Bhishma, Karna, Dronacharya, all my great superiors and authorities. How could I have defeated them? It is only by the grace of my Lord Krishna, I was able to do this. So in this way, Prabhupada highlights that from this series of verses of Arjuna, we should learn that whatever ability that we have by Krishna's grace, it's all coming from Krishna. And Prabhupada explains that one should not be proud of borrowed plumes. That whatever ability we have, whatever little talents we have in any kind of service in life, that talent or that ability to do a certain service nicely, that's all coming from Krishna. If we become proud, Prabhupada explains, in one moment Krishna can withdraw that ability. And we see this, and Prabhupada explains, this is the lesson that Krishna is showing us through Arjuna. On one hand, Prabhupada explains, Krishna empowered his devotee Arjuna so much, with so much divine power, that through his devotee, Arjuna was able to even defeat Lord Shiva in battle. That's how much Krishna can empower his devotee. On the other side, Prabhupada explains, in 1 second, Krishna can withdraw that power, that a person like Arjuna can be even defeated by just a bunch of cowherd men. And that's what happens that's what's given in the first canto of Bhagavatam. That's why Arjuna is lamenting. The Bhagavatam explains that, or Arjuna, he himself admits to Maharaj Yudhishthira that this is how powerful I was. In the past, I was able to do this, I was able to do that, I was able to do this. All by the grace of the Lord, I was able to do so many miraculous, invincible things that no one has ever heard of. But now that my Supreme Lord has gone, and now that he has withdrawn my power, I was defeated in battle by just a bunch of cowherdmen. So in this purport, to this section, Prabhupada explains that all the powers, all the abilities, whatever we have in life, it's all coming from Krishna. And if we become proud that, okay, it's me that's actually doing it, in 1 second, Krishna can just withdraw his power. And that's what we see with Arjuna. On one hand, he was so powerful. In one verse, in the first canto, Arjuna explains in this section that I am the same Arjuna, and I have the same Gandiva bow. I have the same divine weapons accumulated, through my battles with all the demigods. I have the same boons, the same Gandiva bow. It's the same Arjuna with the same chariot. Everything is the same. But still, I was defeated in battle by this cowherdman. How is it? How is it possible? Because Krishna is not present with me. Because Krishna has withdrawn my power. So all our natural powers or abilities or our talents, it's not, Prabhupada explains, we should never think it's due to us. It's all coming from Krishna. And if Krishna wants, just in a moment, he can take that away. And we can practically experience this in our own lives. Like, for example, for myself, I can say, as distributing books, one day Krishna can empower us to distribute 20 books, 30 books, 40 books, 50 books, even on some days. And on these days, you can see, how much Krishna is empowering us to distribute these books. And then you compare that with another day, book distribution will be so hard that, hardly a single person will be taking books from you. So Krishna can immediately withdraw that power. So in this way, even through our own practical lives, even today, through certain services like book distribution, we can see how Krishna is actually empowering us to do this service. On one day, Krishna can empower us to distribute 40, 50 books. On another day, when Krishna withdraws that empowerment, we'll struggle to distribute even a single book. So the same thing that Arjuna is realizing in his life, that actually all these different abilities I had was all by Krishna's grace. Nothing was of mine, nothing was due to my credit. The same thing we can also realize in our own lives if we just simply contemplate on our own spiritual lives. So I'll stop here. So we discussed, I'll just read the purport again. However powerful a living being may be, when he is condemned by God, no one can save him. And similarly, however weak one may be, if he is protected by the Lord, no one can annihilate him. So we discussed about how there was these big demons like Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, and materially speaking, they were invincible. And the devotees of the Lord like Prahlad Maharaj or the monkey soldiers, they didn't stand a chance. But Krishna, because Krishna was on their side, they were protected. And all these big demons, they were annihilated. And we also discussed that whatever little power, ability, talent we have, we should always understand that all these talents and powers is coming by Krishna's grace. And if we become proud, as Prabhupada explains, then at any moment Krishna can withdraw these powers from us and leave us powerless, to help us get the realization that actually whatever we're doing is simply by the mercy of Krishna and his devotees. We will stop here, we're just on time. Gantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jagurusha Prabhupada ki jai, Thai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari.